I came out here this morning to trim the roses, and when I looked down at these old gardening gloves, I started thinking about how full this little yard used to feel. These gloves have been with me for years. The fabric is worn now, and the fingertips are a little rough from the soil. Nothing special really, just an old pair of gardening gloves. But standing here with the cutter in my hand, looking at these roses again, I could almost hear the yard the way it used to sound. The children moving in and out of the house. Robert checking on his tomato plants as though they needed him every 5 minutes. Little voices, little footsteps, small things happening everywhere. The garden is quiet now, peaceful yes, but different, and I suppose that is what made me stop for a moment, because there was a time when this little yard never really felt still. The back door seemed to open every few minutes. One of the children would come running outside, then disappear back into the house again before I could even ask what they were doing. There were shoes near the steps, a watering can left somewhere it did not belong, little voices coming from one side of the yard, then the other. Sometimes somebody needed help finding something. Sometimes somebody was calling my name from inside the house while I was still standing out here with dirt on my hands. The garden was never just a garden back then. It was part of the life of the house. The children moved through it. Robert had his little routines, and I was always somewhere in the middle of it all, trying to keep up. At the time, I do not think I noticed how full it felt. It was simply normal. But standing here now, with everything so quiet, I can almost hear it again. I planted these roses a long time ago, back when the children were still living at home, and the yard always seemed to have somebody moving through it. I do not remember the exact year anymore. I just remember standing out here with dirt on my hands, trying to decide where they should go. At the time, they were small, a little fragile, honestly. I kept checking them, wondering whether they would take properly, and now look at them. They have been through more seasons than I can count. Hot summers, cold winters, storms, dry weeks when I thought I had neglected them too much. And somehow, every spring they come back. Not exactly the same as before, a little fuller in some places, a little thinner in others, but still here. I do not think I understood when I planted them how many different versions of this house they would quietly live through. Robert had his tomato plants over there. He took them very seriously, more seriously than I ever thought tomatoes needed to be taken, if I am honest. He would come outside in the morning, look at the leaves, check the soil, move one little stake, then move it back again a few minutes later. Sometimes I would tell him, "Robert, they are tomatoes. They are not waiting for a staff meeting." He would just look at me and say, "You have to pay attention to these things, Ellie." And maybe he was right. He always seemed to notice the smallest changes. A new leaf, a branch leaning too far, one tomato turning red before the others. He treated those plants as though the whole summer depended on them. At the time, I used to smile at how particular he was. Now when I look over at that little patch of soil, I still catch myself expecting to see him standing there, hands on his hips, studying those tomato plants like they had something important to tell him. Sarah always wanted to help choose the flowers. She was very particular about colors, not in a difficult way. She just seemed to believe every corner of the garden needed to look a certain way. She would stand out here beside me, pointing from one side to the other, saying things like, "Pink ones over there, Mom," and maybe yellow ones near the steps. To her, it was a very serious decision, and I usually let her choose. Sometimes the flowers did not match at all. Sometimes there were too many colors in one little patch, but she was always so pleased with herself when they started blooming. I remember watching her walk around the yard, checking on them as though she had planted an entire garden by herself. Now, when I see flowers growing near the steps, I still think of Sarah standing here beside me, trying to decide where every little color belonged. Michael used to hide little toy cars in the soil. I never really understood why. He would bring them outside, dig a small hole with his hands, and tuck one of those little cars into the dirt, as though he were hiding buried treasure. Sometimes he remembered where he left them. Sometimes he did not. Every now and then I would be pulling weeds or moving a plant and find one half buried near the roots. A little blue car, a red one with one wheel missing. Once I found one of them so deep in the soil that I could not imagine how long it had been sitting there. I used to call Michael over and say, "Sweetheart, I think one of your cars is trying to grow roots." He would smile, take it from me, and usually bury it somewhere else 5 minutes later. Children have their own way of making a place feel lived in. Even the dirt seemed to hold little traces of them. Now, when I turn the soil near the roses, I still find myself wondering whether one of those tiny cars might be hiding down there somewhere. The garden is still here, the roses are still growing. The tomato patch is still in the same corner. The back steps have not moved. But the yard feels different now. The children are grown, busy with their own lives. Robert is gone. And most mornings it is just me out here with the birds and the sound of the leaves moving a little in the breeze. I do not say that to make it sound sad. It is peaceful. There is something nice about the quiet too, but it is a different kind of quiet than it used to be. Back then, the silence never lasted very long. Somebody would open the door. Somebody would call my name. Robert would ask whether I had seen the watering can, even though it was usually sitting right beside him. Now the garden is still here. I am still here, but the noise that once came with it is gone. Every spring these roses come back, no matter what kind of winter we had, no matter how quiet the house felt, no matter how many things changed while the garden was resting. For a while the branches look almost empty. You look at them and wonder whether they are going to bloom properly this year. Then one morning there is a little bit of green. A few days later, another leaf, then a small bud. And before long the roses are here again. Not exactly the same as last year. Some branches grow stronger. Some do not come back at all. A few flowers open earlier than the others. But still, they return. I think that is why I keep coming out here. The garden reminds me that change does not always mean everything is gone. Some things leave your life slowly, and some things quietly return every spring. I think small routines matter more than we realize. Not because they fix everything. They do not. But they give the day somewhere to begin. For me, it is coming out here in the morning, putting on these old gloves, checking the roses, pulling a few weeds, seeing whether the tomatoes need water. Sometimes I stand here for 10 minutes, sometimes longer. There are days when I do not feel like doing much at all. But I still come outside. I still look at the plants. I still trim what needs trimming. And somehow after a little while, I feel steadier. Maybe you have something like that too. A cup of tea in the morning, a walk around the block, a chair on the porch, a sweater you have worn for years, a small thing you keep doing, even when life feels different than it used to. Sometimes it is not the big things that carry us. Sometimes it is the small things we keep doing. I suppose I should finish trimming these roses before the morning gets away from me. There are still a few branches that need attention. A few leaves that have seen better days, and a few blooms that are just beginning to open. The house got quieter. Life changed. The children grew up. Robert is not standing over there with his tomato plants anymore. But every spring these roses come back. Not all at once, not perfectly, just slowly, quietly, one small bloom at a time. And somehow that helps me too. I think that is enough for today. I am going to put these gloves back on, trim a few more branches, and enjoy the morning while it is still cool. Thank you for standing out here with me, sweetheart. If you would like to come sit with me again sometime, you are always welcome. Until next time, take care of yourself. And notice the little things that keep returning.